There is an old man lying face down on a rock. The rock is black, volcanic. It sits in the middle of the Aegean Sea on a small, hard island where Rome sent the people it wanted the world to forget. The old man did not fall because he was weak. He fell because something spoke to him, a voice so vast, so bright, so unlike anything a human throat has ever made, that his knees simply stopped holding him up. He is lying there now, in the dirt, as though he were dead. We will get to that voice, but not yet. First, I want to tell you about two words. You have probably heard the claim. Somebody, somewhere, told you that the Bible says, "Fear not," exactly 365 times. One for every day of the year. It is a beautiful idea. It fits on a coffee mug. It gets shared every January 1st. And it is wrong. Go and count it yourself in any translation you like, and you will not land on 365. Depending on the version, and on whether you count "fear not" and "do not be afraid" and "be not afraid" as the same command, the number swings from around 100 to well over 300. No Bible on earth gives you a clean 365. But here is what most people miss. The number was never the point. This is not a story about a number. This is not a story about a verse you can frame on a wall. This is not a story about a doctrine you argue over at dinner. This is a story about every single time the God of the universe leaned down toward a terrified human being, a real person with a real heartbeat on the worst night of their life, and said two words into the dark. Two words in Hebrew, al-tira, fear not. And here is the part nobody tells you. God never says it to people who are fine. He doesn't whisper, "Fear not," to the comfortable, the safe, the ones who have it all together. Every time those two words appear, you will find a person who is cornered, forgotten, out of options, standing at the edge of something they cannot survive on their own. An old man with no son, a slave woman dying in the desert, a teenage girl alone in a room, a prophet who wanted to die, a father holding his dead daughter, a prisoner on a sinking ship, and one old man face down on a black rock in the middle of the sea. Stay with me, because once you see the pattern, you will never read these two words the same way again. It starts with an old man standing outside his tent at night. His name is Abram. He is somewhere around 85 years old, and he has just come home from a war. He chased down 4 kings to rescue his nephew, and he won. By every measure of his world, this should be the proudest night of his life. The neighbors are impressed. Victory is real, and Abram cannot sleep. Because here is the thing victory does not fix. He has no son. He is an old man with more cattle than he can count, and more servants than he can name, and not one child to leave any of it to. When he dies, a servant will inherit everything. His name will end. In a world where your children were the only future you got, Abram is staring into a future that simply stops at him. So God comes to him in the dark, and the very first recorded "fear not" in the entire Bible is not spoken in a temple, or after a miracle, or to a crowd. It is spoken to one sleepless old man with an empty nursery. "Fear not, Abram, I am thy shield, and thy exceedingly great reward." Look at what God does there. He does not say, "Fear not," because everything is fine. Everything is not fine. Abram still has no son when the sentence ends. What God says is, "Fear not, because I am here." The reason is never the circumstance. The reason is always the presence. Hold that thought, because it comes back every single time. But it gets stranger. Because the next person God says it to is somebody the whole story seemed ready to throw away. Her name is Hagar. She is an Egyptian slave, the property of Abram's wife, and she has just been sent out into the desert with a skin of water and a boy. The water runs out, and there is a moment in this story so honest it almost hurts to read. She cannot watch her die, so she sets the boy down under a bush, walks the distance of a bow shot away, sits in the sand, and weeps. A mother, far enough not to hear, close enough to know. This is the part nobody tells you. Nobody is looking for Hagar. She is a slave, a foreigner, a woman, alone in the wrong part of the wilderness. By every rule of who matters in an ancient story, she should disappear here, and instead, heaven stops. "What aileth thee, Hagar? Fear not, for God hath heard the voice of the lad where he is. God heard, not the prayers of the powerful man back at the tent, the crying of a thrown-away boy in the dust, and the silence of a mother too broken to pray. That is who gets the fear not. And then he opens her eyes, and there is a well, water that was there the whole time that her fear had blinded her to. You should sit with that, because fear does the same thing to you. It doesn't just scare you, it narrows you. It convinces you the well is not there when all along you were a few steps from water. And then there is the prophet who wanted to die. His name is Elijah, and he is the most spectacular man of his generation. He has just called down fire from heaven in the front of an entire nation. He has won the showdown of the century, and 40 days later he is sitting alone under a juniper tree in the desert, begging God to kill him. It is enough. Take away my life. Read that slowly. The man who just defeated 450 enemy prophets is now suicidal under a bush. Because here is something the highlight reels never show you. The crash often comes right after the victory, not the defeat. Elijah is not afraid of his enemies. He is afraid of his own exhaustion. He is afraid that he is alone and that none of it matters. If you have ever fallen apart the week after the thing you worked years for, you already understand him. And watch how God answers him. There is no reading. There is no snap out of it. First, God lets him sleep. Then he sends an angel to cook him a meal, bread and water, twice, with the gentlest words in the whole desert. Arise and eat, because the journey is too great for thee. The Hebrew word hiding under all of this fear is yareh. It is bigger than being scared. It is the feeling of standing in front of something so much larger than you that your knees shake. Awe and dread tangled together. And what God does for the trembling prophet is not shrink the thing he fears. He comes close enough to feed him. A childless old man, a dying slave, a burned-out prophet who wanted to die. 3 people the world had no more use for. And 3 times the same 2 words came looking for them in the dark. Before we go on, stop and notice the shape of this. Every person we have met so far had something in common. Abram had won his war. Hagar had run out of water. Elijah had run out of hope. Not one of them was standing on solid ground when those 2 words found them. Fear does not come to the people who are fine. It comes to the ones at the very edge. And if that pattern is already doing something to you, if you are starting to recognize your own worst night somewhere in these stories, then do one thing for me before we keep going. Subscribe and leave a single word in the comments, the name of the person down there who first felt forgotten. Abram, Hagar, Elijah. I read them, and I want to know which one you saw yourself in, because the next 3 are going to hit even closer. We are about to leave the desert and walk into a room where a teenage girl is about to be told the most terrifying good news in human history. Start with another old man on the ground. We keep coming back to that image, and there is a reason. His name is Daniel. He is an exile, carried off from his homeland as a young man, and now grown old in the palaces of an empire that is not his. And by a great river called the Tigris, he sees something that empties the strength out of his body. He says it himself. There was no strength left in him. His face turned the color of a corpse, and he fell with his face to the ground. An old statesman, a man who had stared down kings and lions, lying flat in the mud because what he saw was simply too much for a human frame to hold. A hand touches him, and the words come, "Fear not, Daniel. From the first day that thou didst set thine heart to understand, thy words were heard." And then something tender, almost starting. The messenger calls this trembling old man greatly beloved. Here is what most people miss about that moment. Daniel had been mourning and praying for 3 weeks, and heaven had been silent. He must have wondered if anyone was listening at all. And the first thing the answer tells him is that his words were heard on day 1. The silence was never absent. The help was already on its way before he ever felt it coming. If you are waiting on an answer right now, let that land on you. Hold on to that. Because the next fear not falls on someone who has every reason to believe she has been handed a death sentence. She is a teenage girl, probably 13, 14 years old. She lives in Nazareth, a town so small and so forgettable that people in her own country used it as a punchline. Her name is Mary, and she is engaged but not yet married. And into her ordinary afternoon, the room fills with light, and an angel says the words that have been falling on frightened people since the beginning. "Fear not, Mary, for thou hast found favor with God." In Greek, these two words are me phobou, don't be afraid. Remember them. You are going to hear them again before this is over, from a very different mouth, on a very different shore. But look at what favor with God is actually about to cost her. We read the Christmas story with soft lighting, so let me put it back in the real world she lived in. An unmarried girl who turns up pregnant in a first-century village faces ruin. The law allowed for her to be stoned. At best, she would be shamed, divorced before she was ever fully married, her future erased. And this was not a gentle world to be vulnerable in. The historian Josephus, writing about this exact era, describes a kingdom under Herod soaked in paranoia and violence, a ruler so afraid of losing his throne that he murdered his own wife and sons. This is the air Mary breathed. Fear was not abstract for her. It was the government. It was the neighbors. It was the very real chance that saying yes to God would cost her everything. And she says yes anyway. Be it unto me according to your word. 11 words from a terrified teenager. That is all it took. Now watch the stakes climb one more step. Because the next time we hear these words, they are not spoken over a frightened person. They are spoken over a dead child. His name is Jairus, and he is an important man, a ruler of the synagogue, the kind of man who usually keeps his distance from traveling preachers. But none of that matters now, because his little girl, 12 years old, is dying. So he does the unthinkable for a man of his standing. He falls down at Jesus' feet in the street and begs. And Jesus turns to go with him. And then the worst sentence a parent can hear happens. Messengers push through the crowd. "Thy daughter is dead. Why trouble you the master any further? It's over." They are telling him to stop hoping. Go home. Bury her. You can feel the floor dropping out of him. And Jesus, who hears it too, turns to this shattered father and says the most outrageous thing in the entire scene. "Be not afraid, only believe." Sit in how impossible that is. The child is dead. The professionals have already declared it. And the command is fear not. Not because the bad news was a mistake. The news was true. But the one giving the command was about walking into that house, taking a cold little hand in his, and saying, "Little girl, get up." And she did. Do you see the thread now? It has not changed once. To the childless, to the slave, to the exhausted, to the trembling old man, to the terrified girl, to the father of a dead child. The same two words, falling into the moment that should have destroyed each of them. And we still have not gotten to the loudest one. There is one more night on one more sea, and then we go back to that black rock where we started. So if these stories are landing, this is the moment to share this with the one person you know who needs to hear "fear not" tonight. They will know why you feel it. Picture the 14th night of a storm. A man named Paul is on a ship that is coming apart in the middle of the Mediterranean. He is a prisoner, in chains, being shipped to Rome to stand trial for his life. For 2 weeks there has been no sun by day and no stars by night, just wind and black water, and a crew so certain they are going to die that they have stopped eating. They have thrown the cargo overboard. They have thrown the ship's own tackle overboard. There is nothing left to throw but themselves. And in the middle of that, a chained prisoner of all people stands up and tells 276 terrified men to take heart. How? Because the night before, in the worst of it, an angel had stood beside him and said the words we have been following this whole time. Fear not, Paul. Notice what God does not promise. He does not promise the ship. The ship is lost. It will be smashed to splinter on the rocks before morning. He promises the people. Not one life on board will be lost. And here, the reason behind every fear not finally says itself out loud, in the mouth of a prisoner standing in a hurricane. Fear not, for I am with thee. The situation was never the point. The presence always was. And now we go back to the rock. Remember the old man we left lying face down at the very beginning? It is time you knew his name. It is John, the last one left alive of the 12 who had walked with Jesus. He is old now. The others are gone, most of them killed for what they believed. And John has been exiled to a barren prison island called Patmos, a chip of black volcanic rock in the Aegean Sea. The early church historian Eusebius tells us he was sent there under the Emperor Domitian, banished simply for refusing to stop speaking the name of Christ. So picture him, the last living friend of Jesus, an old man, alone, on a rock at the edge of the world, with every reason to believe the story was over and he had been forgotten on the way out. And then the voice comes, a voice like a trumpet, like many waters. And John, who once leaned his head on Jesus' chest at supper, who watched him die and watched him walk out of a tomb, even John cannot stand. He falls at the feet of the figure of light as though he were dead. And a hand touches him, the same gesture that touched Daniel by the river. And the rising Christ says 2 words to his oldest friend, Me phobu, fear not. The same 2 words Gabriel said to a teenage girl in Nazareth, the same command that found Abram in the dark, and Hagar in the desert, and Elijah under his tree. The same 2 words, now spoken by the resurrected Christ himself to the last man standing. Fear not. I am the first and the last. I am he that lived and was dead, and behold, I am alive forevermore. That is the voice we have been walking toward this entire time, and it has been saying the same thing from the first page of the Bible to the last. Now let me bring all of this off the page and into your life, because that is where it was always meant to land. You know this fear, not the kind in the movies, the kind that comes at 3 in the morning. The phone that rings in the dark and your stomach drops before you even answer it. The chair in the waiting room while someone you love is behind a door you cannot go through. The drive home after the appointment, grabbing the wheel when the diagnosis is still echoing and the whole world looks exactly the same and completely different at once. That fear does not happen through your logic. It happens in your body, in your chest, your hands, your breath, before your mind ever catches up. Every person in this video felt that exact thing. Abram felt it. Mary felt it. The father of that little girl felt it on the walk home. It is the oldest human feeling there is, and you are not strange for feeling it too. And the God of the entire Bible has exactly one response to it. He doesn't explain it away. He does not promise the storm will skip you. He comes close, and into the worst moment of your life, he says the same 2 words he has been saying all along. Not, fear not because nothing is wrong. Fear not because I am here. So let me leave you with 3 things to carry out of this. The first is simple, and it does not do the myth we started with. Fear was never about a number. It is not 365, and it does not need to be. It is the most repeated command in all of Scripture for one reason only, because fear is the most repeated human condition. God said it more than anything else because we needed it more than anything else. You were never meant to count it. You were meant to hear it. The second goes deeper, and it is the thread you watched run through every single story. Not once did God say, "Fear not, because nothing is wrong." Abram still had no child when the sentence ended. The ship still sank. The little girl was still dead when the words were spoken over her. God never builds the command on your circumstances, because your circumstances will not always hold. He builds it on himself. Every fear not in the Bible is really one sentence with the same ending. I am with you. That is the only thing that has never once changed. And the third is the one I want you to take to bed tonight. The voice that found Abram outside his tent in the dark. The voice that heard a thrown-away boy crying in the desert. The voice that fed a prophet who wanted to die. That called a trembling old man greatly beloved. That steadied a teenage girl. That raised a dead child. that stood beside a prisoner in a hurricane, and that lifted the last apostle off a cold black rock at the edge of the world. That voice knows your name. It knows the appointment you are dreading. It knows the 3 a.m. that is coming for you. And it has been saying the same 2 words since the beginning of the world, and it is saying them to you right now. Fear not, because I am here. So I have to ask you, out of all of them, Abram, Hagar, Elijah, Daniel, Mary, the father at his daughter's bedside, Paul in the storm, John on the rock, which fear not hit you the hardest tonight? Tell me below, tell me the name, and tell me why. I read every one of them, and someone scrolling through these comments at their own 3 in the morning is going to need to see yours. If this is the kind of thing you want to keep hearing, you know what to do. Subscribe and stay closed. And the next time the fear comes for you in the dark, and it will, I hope you remember an old man on a rock and a hand on his shoulder and 2 words that have outlived every empire that ever tried to silence them. Fear not. You are not alone in the room.